It's hard to appreciate the presence and scale of a bridge over a major waterway until piers start to stand above the surface of the water. As the second year of the St. Croix Crossing construction comes to a close, the public is getting their first look at just how dynamic the bridge will be in the valley. All 5 river pier locations are built to the roadway height, and construction of the crossbeams are underway. A lot of thought went into the design of these pier columns to guarantee they'll last 100 years and contribute to the beauty of the area instead of taking away from it.
The aesthetics were very integral in the process of designing this particular bridge to fit into the St. Croix River. The piers have what we call a blade-like structure or a reed-like structure, which would mimic some of the plants along the waterway. So reed-like means that they're narrow and somewhat wide. So the pier blades that we constructed on this project, a lot of tapers and curves, but they are 4 feet in thickness, and then the width varies, but approximately 20 feet in width, and they reach about 100 feet to 140 feet depending on which pier location they are. So aesthetics played a very big part, and as the contractors built them, we can see that it indeed has been very beautiful.
Early on in the design process, designers reduced the number of pier locations in the river from 6 to 5 to help minimize the bridge's environmental impact and decrease the construction costs. Pier construction also considered the varying heights of the bluffs in each state. The pier heights differ up to 40 feet from the Minnesota side to the Wisconsin side of the river. Each pier column is made up of 2 4-foot-thick reed-like blades. The distinct opening in the center of the piers is strategically designed to create a less obstructed view of the river and to allow the bridge to move. This is particularly important in climates like Wisconsin and Minnesota, because the hot summers and cold winters cause the concrete in the bridge to expand and contract with the seasons.
When materials get cold, so for instance in the cold Minnesota winters, elements like concrete will get smaller, they will shrink. And so the bridge has to accommodate that shrinking. As the concrete gets cooler, it will get colder. As the concrete then heats up in the spring and the summer, it will expand. And so the bridge has to accommodate that. One example in layman's terms, and that most kids will have experienced, is bouncing a ball. In the winter, when it's cold, that ball, the air in it would tend to be a little bit less, and you bounce the ball and it won't go as high. But that same ball in the summer, in the heat of the summer, would bounce a little bit higher. So it's the same thing with the elements in the bridge. The concrete and the steel will likewise expand and contract, whether it's hot or it's cold.
Over the course of a year, the column's shape allows them to flexibly move up to 6.5 inches in each direction. Each pier was constructed in 3 to 5 sections, depending on its height. Construction workers first installed a steel form on top of each pier foundation. Then, they placed by hand a web of epoxy-coated rebar. Finally, they poured wet concrete over the rebar inside the form. The concrete was allowed to harden and gain strength, or what's called the curing process, before workers moved the forms up to complete the next section. This process was repeated until each pier was built to full height. After pier construction comes the crossbeam, one at each of the 5 river pier locations. The crossbeam is a horizontal structure that connects an upstream column to a nearby downstream column. The crossbeam adds structural stability and is the first step required for building the bridge deck. The precast concrete segments, which make up the driving surface, frame into each crossbeam and carry all of the weight from the bridge back to the piers. The construction process goes like this. First, crews install a temporary truss system to support construction efforts. This process uses forms and rebar just like constructing the piers. Forms are fitted in the shape of the crossbeam. Then, iron workers place rebar and post-tensioning tendons by hand with the forms. Post-tensioning means that crews are reinforcing or strengthening the concrete with high-strength steel strands or bars. Next, crews pour wet concrete into the forms and over the rebar and tendons. This is a tedious process, which is why the crossbeam is constructed in 3 stages. The total rebar in each crossbeam weighs 478,000 pounds, and each crossbeam is made up of 130 truckloads of concrete. Once the concrete has cured to its desired strength, crews remove the forms. Finally, the steel bars and strands inside the structure are tensioned or pulled like a rubber band in both directions.
There's a lot of things interior to this bridge that people will not see. Within the crossbeam, there's access points for inspections in the future to be able to access through the crossbeams up into the pylons and be able to access the towers and make sure that everything is performing as desired, making sure there's no deterioration, no deterioration of materials of any sort. So that's all interior that we really can't see as we're looking at the bridge from the outside. A lot of work was done 24 hours a day on the crossbeams especially, that the ironworker crews and carpenter crews from time to time would be working in 2 different shifts around the clock to get that complicated work completed.
Once the piers are built to full height and the columns are connected by a crossbeam, construction workers will piece together the nearly 1-mile-long new St. Croix Crossing.